You may have seen the movie Silent Hill or even played the video games, but what if I told you that Silent Hill was a real place? It may not have demons, cults, and the evil spirits aspect to it, but it is a mining town in Pennsylvania, instead of West Virginia, where church services are still held. Sometimes there is a thick fog, and there are gases and steam venting from the underground mine fire. Silent Hill was abandoned due to a coal seam fire, and that's also what caused Centralia to be evacuated in the 1980s. Centralia is a small town in Pennsylvania that no longer has a zip code and was essentially wiped off the map after a mine fire that has been burning for, at the time of recording this, 60 years, but that mine fire took over the town. A common misconception is that the video games are based off of Centralia. They're not, but I'll go over that later in this video. Some may even refer to Centralia as a ghost town due to the very few residents left and because nature has reclaimed the town. Was the demise of Centralia an accident, a curse, or a conspiracy theory that the government wanted the land at a low price? Let's dive into the real Silent Hill. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, as you can tell by the title and the intro, we will be talking about Centralia, Pennsylvania, which is sometimes referred to as the real Silent Hill. So of course, just as a disclaimer, this video is for entertainment purposes only, and based on the research that I was able to do from online sources and things like that, I do encourage everyone to do their own research, but all of my sources will be linked in the description box below. So this is year 3 of me doing my Spooktober series, and I'm so excited because this is probably my favorite series that I do here on my channel. It isn't as popular as my other content, which is totally fine, but I really enjoy this time of year. I enjoy this type of content, but I love everything spooky, mysterious, and strange, weird, all of that kind of stuff. I'll link my entire playlist for previous Spooktober series and stuff like that, and any kind of weird, mysterious videos that I've done in between there. There's only one, but I will leave that playlist link below in case you want more content like that. I do also have to give just a little bit of a disclaimer if there's any kind of background noise. It's because I have my daughter and my dogs here in the room with me, but also we had a slight emergency with our house and there's some construction going on. My husband and his brother are working on the house today. So if there's any background noise, I'm so sorry. I hope the mic doesn't pick it up, but I guess I'll just find out in editing. Anyway, enough of my rambling. Let's get into the video. Centralia is located in what is now Columbia County in Pennsylvania. This land did belong to Native American tribes, and they sold it in 1749 for 500 pounds. Later down the line in 1770, construction was started for Reading Road, which would eventually become Route 61. Route 61 is the main highway in Centralia, and in 1793, Robert Morris, who was one of the people who signed the Declaration of Independence, acquired a third of Centralia. He would later declare bankruptcy in 1798, and the land was taken over by the Bank of the United States. Stephen Girard, who was a French sea captain, purchased Robert's land for $30,000 and found out that there was anthracite coal beneath the town's surface. Jonathan Faust opened up a tavern called the Bull's Head Tavern in 1832. This would give the town's first name, which was Bull's Head. The land was bought by the Locust Mountain Coal and Iron Company in 1842. Alexander Ray, who was a mining engineer, moved his entire family and decided to start the development of the town. In 1854, the Mine Run Railroad was built to transport coal. Alexander first named the town Centerville, but because there was already a Centerville, he changed the name to Centralia in 1865. In 1856, the first 2 mines opened up in Centralia. These 2 mines were the Locust Run Mine and the Coal Ridge Mine. Later in 1860, the Hazeldale Colliery Mine, I'm not sure if I'm saying that properly, I'm so sorry, I probably should have checked that before I made this video, but that mine would open, followed by the Centralia Mine in 1862 and the Continental Mine in 1863. The Continental Mine was actually located on Stephen Girard's former land, the French sea captain I spoke about just a few minutes ago. In 1865, the Lehigh Valley Railroad and Lehigh and Mahoney Railroad, that is a mouthful, were built in order to transport the coal to markets in eastern Pennsylvania. On October 17th, 1868, Alexander Ray, Centralia's founder, was murdered by members of the Molly Maguires. 3 men would be convicted and executed on March 25th, 1878. More murders and other incidents such as arson happened during the 1860s by the Molly Maguires. This was because the Molly Maguires wanted to form a union for the mine workers because they wanted better wages and better working conditions. Legend has it that Father Daniel Ignatius McDermott, who was the first Roman Catholic priest in Centralia, cursed the town because he was assaulted by 3 members of the Molly Maguires in 1869. Father Daniel Ignatius McDermott stated that there would come a day where St. Ignatius Church would be the only remaining building in Centralia. But who were the Molly Maguires? I'm not going to go over the Mollys in full detail because that can be an entire video on its own, so I'll just give a brief overview. The Mollys were said to be a secret society from Ireland that was looking for fair wages and working conditions, and many of the miners were Irish. If you didn't know, there was a time where signs would read, "Help wanted, no Irish need apply." Although there are some historians, such as Richard Jensen, who are arguing that this is a myth of victimization. Regardless of the arguments of how common or uncommon the "No Irish Need Apply" signs were that were placed in help wanted ads, they were still placed there, so it's still horrible. Anyway, the Mollys would often be involved in violent conflicts. Because of this, it's been said that 20 members of the Mollys were convicted of murder and arson and were later hanged in 1877 and 1878. This part of the Mollys' history has been debated by historians. The Mollys were also present in Liverpool, England. There was a newspaper in Liverpool and they would report on the crimes and assaults by the Mollys. The newspaper described the Mollys as a mutual defense association that had been formed for the mutual assistance of the members when they got into trouble. The Liverpool branch of the Mollys was known for its violence, not for any type of activism for the welfare of Irish people. After reading about all of the violence that ensued with the Mollys, I do wonder if they had good intentions when they first formed and it just spiraled into violence. While I don't condone violence, I can't help but wonder if that violence was rooted in the treatment of Irish people. Eventually, anyone who has been treated poorly, especially a group of people, can snap and think that violence is the only way to be heard. If we look back on Irish people during the potato famine, for example, many died and the rest were doing whatever they could to survive. There is an article that I came across that was about the Irish, and while reading it, I questioned if what the Irish had been through could have caused some of them who formed the Mollys to behave this way. During the potato famine, which I'm sure most of us know about, but the article painted a picture of how horrible the landscape looked and how barefoot mothers clutched dead infants in their arms as they begged for food, while wild dogs would feed on human corpses. Farmers were sprinkling their crops with holy water, hoping for a miracle. Typhus, dysentery, tuberculosis, and cholera were diseases that were also present during these already hard times, which would lead to mass graves. If this wasn't bad enough, one article stated, quote, "More than just the pestilence was responsible for the Great Hunger. A political system ruled by London and an economic system dominated by British absentee landlords were co-conspirators. For centuries, British laws had deprived Ireland's Catholics of their rights to worship, vote, speak their language, and own land, horses, and guns. Now, with a famine raging, the Irish were denied food. Under armed guard, food convoys continued to export wheat, oats, and barley to England while Ireland starved." End quote. Charles E. Trevelyan, I'm not sure if I'm saying that properly, but he was a British civil servant, and he said, quote, "The judgment of God sent the calamity to teach the Irish a lesson. That calamity must not be too much mitigated." End quote. By 1852, Ireland's population was almost half what it was prior to the famine. Approximately 1 million died and another 2 million abandoned their homes and land. With those who fled Ireland, they came to America hoping for a better life than what Ireland had become. Unfortunately, Americans were not exactly welcoming towards the Irish immigrants and actually discriminated against them. The Irish didn't have good working conditions or even good jobs at that. They often worked very dangerous jobs at low pay. Some of these jobs included cutting canals, digging trenches for water and sewer pipes, laying rail lines down, cleaning houses, working in textile mills, and more. There is obviously more to the story, but I'll leave a great article link below about what the Irish had gone through both in Ireland and when they immigrated to what they thought would be a great life in America. After going over all of that and going back to the Mollys, I'm not saying the violent crimes are right or justified or anything like that, but I'm sure some people just had enough. I'm just trying to offer a different perspective here. By 1890, Centralia had reached their maximum population of 2,761 residents, according to the federal census records. The town had 7 churches, 5 hotels, 27 saloons, 2 theaters, a bank, a post office, and 14 general and grocery stores. The production of anthracite coal in Pennsylvania reached its peak 37 years later. However, once the young miners started enlisting in the military when the U.S. entered World War I, production of the coal declined. Then, when the Wall Street crash of 1929 happened, the Lehigh Valley Coal Company had to close 5 of the mines in Centralia. Of course, this meant lots of people lost their jobs. So what some people started doing was bootleg mining, and they would use techniques that were called pillar robbing. This is when miners would extract coal from coal pillars left in the mines to support their roofs. Because of the pillar robbing, this caused many idle mines to just collapse. In 1950, Centralia Council acquired the rights to all of the coal beneath Centralia. By that time, the federal census showed that 1,986 residents remained in Centralia. Most of the coal mining companies shut down in the 1960s, and coal mining did continue until then. Bootleg mining is said to have continued until 1982. According to one source, strip and open pit mining are still active in the area, which I'm not sure how given what we are about to go over, but I'm also no expert in coal mining or anything like that. With all of that being said, what happened to Centralia that would eventually cause residents to move and abandon their homes? Remember how I talked about miners and pillar robbing? Because of the many mines that collapsed, sealing off the mines wasn't as effective as they had hoped. In May 1962, the Centralia Borough Council hired 5 members of the volunteer fire company to clean up the town landfill. This was something they did previously and usually did it on Memorial Day. However, this particular year, the landfill was in a different location. The landfill was located in an abandoned strip mine pit next to the Oddfellows Cemetery. On May 27, 1962, they set the landfill on fire and let it burn for some time. I've seen some videos talking about Centralia, and some people are shocked at the whole burning the landfill part or burning garbage, that kind of thing. But this isn't anything new or something that was uncommon. Anyway, what the firefighters didn't know was that the fire didn't fully go out. Because of an unsealed opening in the pit, it allowed the fire to enter the mines. Some other sources claim that the fire was started the day prior when a trash hauler dumped hot ash or coal into the open trash pit. One source writes, quote, "When most of the paper on the surface of the landfill was gone, the firemen poured water on it until they could no longer see flames," wrote David Dekick in Fire Underground. "They left believing the fire was out. However, a sliver of it endured, smoldering through heaps of garbage and into the old mine tunnels. There, minuscule sparks ignited a raging coal-fueled furnace below Centralia," end quote. There was a town council meeting on June 4th, 1962 that stated that there were 2 fires at the landfill, and in addition to this, the town was supposed to install a fire-resistant clay barrier between each layer of the landfill, but this wasn't done because they fell behind schedule. Because of this, the hot coals were able to penetrate the seam that was underneath the pit, and this started a fire. Some people have also stated that the Bass Colliery fire of 1932 never fully extinguished, and that fire somehow reached the landfill by 1962. This was later allegedly debunked by a miner named Frank Georgill Sr. because he stated that he, along with his brother, operated a bootleg mine near the landfill from 1960 to 1962. which means if the fire in 1932 had not been put out, Frank and his brother would have possibly died due to noxious gases. Regardless of what claim or theory is true, the fact still stands that the council knew there was a fire. And from what it seems, in my opinion, of course, that they really didn't do too much to stop the fire, even though taxpayers paid a lot of money to try and extinguish the fire. 1979 is the year townspeople of Centralia found out the severity of the situation. Coddington's gas station owner, then Mayor John Coddington, was checking the fuel level in his gas tanks. He noticed the dipstick he used seemed hot, so he decided to put a thermometer on a string and put it into the tank. The temperature of the gasoline was over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. I say over 100 degrees because some sources I saw said 122 degrees and others said 172 degrees. Whichever one is correct, the fact still remains that it was hot. Homes of the residents were rife with carbon monoxide, which not only could result in death, but was also causing residents to have respiratory infections such as chronic bronchitis. On February 14, 1981, there was an almost fatal incident. Todd Domboski, who was 12 years old at the time, almost fell to his death. A sinkhole that was about 4 feet wide and 150 feet deep opened up underneath his feet while he was in his grandmother's backyard and he was grasping on for dear life. Eric Wolfgang, who was Todd's cousin and 14 years old at the time, pulled Todd out of the hole. If Todd's cousin was not there at the time, he would have died. There was hot steam coming out of the sinkhole, and when it was later tested, it was found that it contained a lethal level of carbon monoxide. One source stated that this same year, after Todd almost falling to his death, Centralia's mayor collapsed in an apartment above the gas station he owned. He had been overcome by fumes that somehow managed to get into his home through a vent pipe in the building. Because of the constant release of noxious fumes, it's very possible to asphyxiate due to smoke inhalation, even if you're outside. One source reads, quote, "The most likely cause of suffocation in Centralia is a random release of smoke or gas that strikes without warning and fills your lungs before you can take refuge," end quote. However, in present day, even though these noxious gases almost destroyed all of the vegetation and wildlife, somehow there is new foliage filling the fissures. While the people of Centralia knew that this fire existed and the incidents that had happened, some people were still divided about if the fire was an actual threat to the town. No offense to anyone there, but I think a sinkhole opening up and almost killing a 14-year-old and noxious gases coming from the ground that could cause me to asphyxiate would have been enough for me to say that yes, the fire was a threat to the town. The residents of Centralia may have not been in agreement about the fire being a threat, but the government, specifically the United States Congress, stepped in 1983. Congress allocated more than $42 million to relocate the residents. Almost all of the residents did accept the buyout offers, and more than 1,000 people moved out of Centralia. After that, 500 structures were demolished, and by 1990, it was reported that Centralia had 63 residents left. 2 years later, in 1992, the governor of Pennsylvania, who was Bob Casey, invoked eminent domain on all of the property within Centralia. He condemned all of the buildings. The remaining residents of Centralia did attempt to overturn this. However, they were unsuccessful. A decade later, in 2002, the U.S. Postal Service discontinued Centralia's zip code, which was 17927. Pretty much wiping Centralia off of the map as if this once prosperous town never existed. I mean, not literally, because Centralia does show up on Google Maps, but their zip code was no more, and any mail that was sent there was marked return to sender. By 2006, only 16 homes were still standing, which decreased to 11 by 2009 when Governor Ed Rendell started evicting the remaining Centralia residents. By 2010, only 5 homes remained. Because the mine fire of Centralia extended all the way beneath Byrnesville, that town was also required to be abandoned. Once the residents of Centralia pass away, their homes and land become eminent domain. As I stated, very few homes still remain in Centralia today. Abandoned buildings have been either demolished or reclaimed by nature. One building that still remains and looks to not have been affected by the mine fire is a Ukrainian Catholic church named the Assumption of the Blessed Mary, also referred to as St. Mary's, and holds weekly services. Even though it's St. Mary's that holds weekly services and not St. Ignatius, could the curse that Father Daniel Ignatius McDermott set on the town in fact be true? It's been said that some of the people buried in the cemeteries cannot rest in peace due to the fire swallowing the ground above. The man behind Odd Things I've Seen talked about his experience visiting Centralia, and the second time he went, he talked about how when him, his wife, and daughter were going out to old Route 61, they came in contact with some other people who were going out to look at the massive cracks in the road, and that one person told him about a large sinkhole in the woods behind the graveyards that seemed like a bottomless pit when you dropped things in it. Two residents by the name of John Komarninsky and John Lokitis Jr. were evicted in May and July of 2009. In May of 2009, the remaining residents of Centralia tried to reverse the 1992 eminent domain claim yet again, however, were unsuccessful. The town council still had regular meetings as of 2011. Their highest bill that was reported came from PPL, which is a power company, and that bill was at a whopping $92. In February of 2012, the Commonwealth Court ruled that a declaration of taking could not be reopened or set aside on the basis that the purpose for the condemnation no longer exists. 7 people, including the town council president, had filed a lawsuit claiming that condemnation was no longer needed because the underground fire had moved and the air quality in Centralia was the same as Lancaster, PA. Which, if you didn't know, Centralia's mine fire isn't the only mine fire that's been burning for a long time. In October of 2013, the remaining residents settled their lawsuit and received $218,000 for the value of their homes, along with $131,500 to settle additional claims and the right to stay in their homes for the rest of their lives. The town has low round metal steam vents in the south of Centralia, and there are signs that warn people of the underground fire, unstable ground, and dangerous levels of carbon monoxide. It's been said that there was smoke and steam seen coming from a portion of Route 61 and other cracks in the ground. However, some people that visited Centralia in the past didn't see any of the smoke or steam. The current owners of the property decided to cover the graffiti highway section of Old 61 a little over 2 years ago in April of 2020. Oh, that's something I didn't mention before, but lots of people who have visited Centralia decided to go to a portion of Route 61 that was beyond repair and just spray paint graffiti. It wasn't even art, it was just a bunch of penises all over the highway. In my opinion, if you're going to graffiti something, at least try and turn it into art, especially in a town like Centralia that has been referred to a ghost town. I mean, y'all could have done so many things with that. Residents of Centralia decided to create a time capsule back in 1966. They were scheduled to open the capsule in 2016, exactly 50 years after it was buried. Due to someone trying to steal the capsule in May of 2014, they opened it early, which in my opinion is messed up because just let the residents have one thing to themselves. I think they've been through enough. I don't know if this was an actual resident or just someone visiting Centralia to see what it looked like, but regardless, it's still messed up. Anyway, one article talked about the capsule in further detail, and after talking about the capsule being attempted to be broken into, the article said, suspecting some of the historical items might have been taken from the capsule, Ed Lawler, commander of the Centralia American Legion 608, said the organization made the decision to dig it up early and check it to see if any contents were missing. When we opened it, the contents were floating in water inside it, Lawler said. The items were just in plastic bags stapled shut. Many of them were moldy inside. After working with a number of people to dry out the items, Lawler and the American Legion Post set out to do what the organization set out to do when it was going to dig up the items in 2016 at Centralia's 150th celebration. Distribute the items to the families that donated them 50 years ago. And I'm not sure if that was a typo because they put set out to do twice, but anyway, sorry. Once they opened the time capsule, they found a miner's helmet, a miner's lamp, some coal, a bonnet, a Bible, local souvenirs, and a pair of bloomers signed by the men of Centralia in 1966. The coins and lamp that they found were in pretty good shape, but there was a metal scroll holder with a letter inside of it from, at the time, Mayor George Winnick, but unfortunately, due to rust and corrosion, it destroyed the letter. They also found a small bottle of London gin in the capsule. When they decided to open the time capsule, about 75 former residents and family members attended the ceremony. There were newspapers in the capsule from the Morning Press and the Ashland Daily News with articles about Centralia's centennial celebration. It's kind of sad hearing about what they found in the time capsule because it showed what Centralia used to be, even though the fire had already started 4 years prior. This time capsule represented a town once prosperous because of the anthracite coal that would eventually become the town's destruction. Speaking of the coal underneath Centralia, there were several residents that believed that the government stepped in to take over the town because of a conspiracy to gain the mineral rights to the coal. Residents have stated that the value of coal could be in the hundreds of millions. No one has been able to verify the actual value of the anthracite coal, though. According to the author of Odd Things I've Seen, while he visited Centralia for a second time, he stated, quote, "This time a pair of homemade signs welcomed us to that part of town," end quote. I'll add in a photo from this same website of some signs that welcome you into the town, and clearly the residents are pretty much just trying to keep the government out. The reason why the residents even came up with this theory is because according to state law, when there are no residents left in a town or borough, the town ceases to exist. When that happens, the mineral rights become property of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. With that said, many of the residents believe that the methods used to extinguish the fire were ineffective, possibly on purpose in order for the government and private corporations to buy the land at a low price. If the coal in Centralia is truly valued really high, I can definitely see how this theory came about. Anthracite coal is actually more valuable than regular coal, and it has the highest heating value of all of the other types of coal. There was one really great article that was written in August of this year at the time of this recording, which is 2022, that was titled "Mined Anthracite Coal Market to Reach $74.3 billion by 2031, Observes TMR Study. An increase in the need for electricity is anticipated to drive coal consumption in the power sector, which is expected to fuel expansion of global mined anthracite coal market." So I will leave that article link below in case you are interested in learning about that a little bit more. But the question remains, was the government responsible for all of this? Did they purposely let the fire burn even though they told people that they tried their best? Time will tell once the remaining residents of Centralia sadly pass away. I truly hope that the theory these residents have isn't true, but I can't say I would be surprised. Now that I've gone over the history of Centralia and what happened to this town, let's talk about why people call this the real Silent Hill and some common misconceptions about the town being the inspiration for the game Silent Hill. When it comes to the movie Silent Hill, which was released on April 21st, 2006, that's when Centralia became a slight inspiration in addition to being an adaptation of the game. Roger Avery, who is an Academy Award-winning screenwriter, was said to work with the creators of the game. In the movie, Rose Da Silva asked a gas station attendant what the best way to get to Silent Hill is. The roads to Silent Hill no longer existed due to an underground coal mine fire. While Rose is walking into Silent Hill, ash starts to fall on her cheek along with walking into a thick fog. Centralia may not have ash falling from the sky, but they do occasionally deal with thick fog. But thick fog here and there is pretty normal weather, so it's not something that is strictly happening in Centralia. There have been plenty of times where I've driven home in thick fog and not been able to see 5 feet in front of me. I'm sure a lot of us have experienced that at some point in our lives. Silent Hill is an empty town, or so it seems at first. The town had witch-burning Puritans who murdered a woman 30 years prior. It was a ritual gone wrong, and it in turn lit the coal seam on the fire below the town. Centralia may not have had any type of rituals going on, at least that we know of, but the landfill that was set on fire did ignite the coal seam below as well. This woman who was murdered, who now had demonic powers, cursed the town of Silent Hill, a town not only on fire, but now cursed as well. Air raid sirens go off to tell whoever is left that the darkness is coming. Then Silent Hill turns into a different world, and it's what nightmares are made up of. The movie isn't a full adaptation of the game, and it only vaguely adapts it. Whitney Chavis, who is the owner of the Silent Hill Historical Society fan site, stated, quote, "I was pretty disappointed that the movie ended up being an extremely loose adaptation," end quote. Akira Yamaoka, who was the composer for the game for Silent Hill, served as executive producer for the movie. He and Konami were happy with Avery's script, even with the inspiration from Centralia. Chavis believes that the reason why people think the video game was inspired by Centralia is due to them also thinking the movie was a direct adaptation, and with Centralia providing some inspiration for the movie, that's where the confusion comes from. The movie did introduce a lot of people to the game though. The art director for the first 3 games, Masahiro Ito, stated, quote, "Just to clarify, there was no town that inspired the design of Silent Hill in the game. To be honest, I really get tired of this," end quote. Now I know Reddit isn't a reliable source, but I found this one thread about Team Silent very interesting, and I will leave that linked below. It's a common misconception that Centralia was the inspiration for the game. With all of that said, it's really sad to see what happened to Centralia. A once flourishing town with its issues, of course, is now nearly abandoned because of a fire that's been burning for, at the time of filming this, 60 years. It's said that this fire can burn for over 100 years. This fire was and is the demise of what was once Centralia. Was this all an accident? Is this the curse that Father Daniel Ignatius McDermott cast on the town running its course? Or are the theories surrounding the government wanting the land at a low cost true? Maybe time will tell, or maybe we'll never know the truth. What we do know is people were forced out of their homes, places where they made memories and even raised families. Now, all that remains are a few buildings, fissures, sinkholes, nature reclaiming the town, and a church on top of the hill. As the author behind Odd Things I've Seen said, quote, "Centralia is a ghost town on fire," end quote.